For centuries, hidden within ancient manuscripts and forgotten traditions, the stories of Africa have remained woven throughout the pages of Scripture. This is Hidden Scrolls of Africa. One of the most intriguing and often overlooked references in the Bible appears in only a single verse. Yet that brief statement sparked a conflict among the leaders of Israel and revealed a connection between the biblical world and the ancient lands of Africa. Hidden within the 12th chapter of the book of Numbers is a reference to a woman described simply as a Cushite. She appears only briefly in the text, yet her presence caused tension within the family of Moses and raised questions that have fascinated readers for centuries. To understand this story, we must first return to the wilderness journey of the Israelites. After their dramatic escape from Egypt, the people of Israel began their long and uncertain journey through the desert toward the land promised to their ancestors. Their leader was Moses, the prophet who had confronted Pharaoh, called down the plagues upon Egypt, and led the Israelites through the waters of the Red Sea. Moses stood at the center of Israel's story. He was not only a political leader, but also a spiritual mediator between the people and God. Through him came the laws, the commandments, and the guidance that would shape the identity of the nation. Yet leadership often brings tension, even among family members. Within the camp of Israel were two people who had known Moses since childhood. His brother Aaron and his sister Miriam had both played important roles in the story of Israel's deliverance. Aaron served as the high priest, responsible for the sacred rituals that defined Israel's worship. Miriam was known as a prophetess and had helped lead the people in celebration after the crossing of the Red Sea. These two figures were not outsiders. They were part of Moses' own family and among the most respected leaders within the community. Yet at one point during the wilderness journey, a dispute arose. The book of Numbers tells us that Miriam and Aaron began to speak against Moses. Their criticism centered on a woman. The scripture states that they spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. The statement in the book of Numbers is brief and mysterious. The Bible does not give us the name of Moses' Cushite wife. It does not tell us where Moses met her, when the marriage took place, or what her role was within the community of Israel. Instead, the text offers only a single identifying detail. She was a Cushite. To modern readers, that description might seem vague, but in the ancient world, the word Cush carried a very specific meaning. The land of Cush lay south of Egypt along the Nile River. This region corresponds roughly to parts of what are today Sudan and Ethiopia. For thousands of years, the Nile Valley connected these lands through trade, migration, and political alliances. The civilizations of Cush were powerful and sophisticated. Archaeologists have uncovered entire cities built by Cushite rulers. Temples, fortifications, and pyramids still stand in the deserts of Nubia as reminders of these ancient kingdoms. In fact, the Cushite kingdoms were so powerful at certain times in history that their rulers conquered Egypt itself. During the 8th century before Christ, kings from Nubia marched north along the Nile and established control over Egypt. Historians refer to this period as the 25th dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs. These African rulers governed one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. This historical reality reminds us that the world described in the Bible was far more interconnected than we sometimes imagine. Africa and the Near East were not isolated regions. They were linked by trade routes, political alliances, and shared cultural influences. Caravans moved across deserts carrying gold, ivory, incense, and precious stones. Ships sailed along the Nile, transporting goods and people between distant lands. Against this backdrop, the presence of a Cushite woman within the story of Moses becomes less surprising. Moses himself had spent many years living outside Egypt. According to the biblical narrative, he fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian who was abusing an Israelite laborer. During his exile, he lived in the land of Midian, where he married Zipporah and began a family. These years of exile exposed Moses to cultures and communities beyond Egypt. It is possible that his life intersected with people from regions further south along the Nile. Some scholars have suggested that the reference to a Cushite woman might even refer to a later marriage during the wilderness period. Others believe the term Cushite may have been used more broadly to describe someone from African regions connected to the Nile Valley. The Bible does not give a clear answer. What it does tell us is that this marriage became the focus of criticism from within Moses' own family. The criticism of Miriam and Aaron did not end with the mention of the Cushite woman. The biblical text quickly reveals that something deeper was happening. After speaking against Moses because of the woman he had married, Miriam and Aaron ask a question that exposes the real tension beneath the surface. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? This is one of the most revealing lines in the entire story. It shows that the issue was not only about Moses' marriage, it was also about authority, leadership, and spiritual status within the community of Israel. Miriam and Aaron were not ordinary members of the camp. Aaron served as the high priest, the central figure in Israel's sacrificial system and sacred worship. His role placed him at the heart of the nation's religious life. Miriam was also a leader of great significance. Earlier in the biblical story, after the crossing of the Red Sea, she led the women of Israel in song and celebration. The text identifies her as a prophetess, a woman with spiritual standing among the people. So, when Miriam and Aaron questioned Moses, they did so as respected figures in their own right. But Moses held a role unlike any other. According to the biblical narrative, Moses was the one through whom God delivered the law. He was the one who entered the mountain, received the commandments, and carried divine instruction back to the people. He was the one who stood between the nation and disaster more than once, pleading for mercy when judgment threatened to fall on Israel. Again and again, the story of the wilderness shows Moses acting as mediator, leader, judge, and intercessor. That unique role may have created strain, even within his own family. The mention of the Cushite woman may have been the opening point of criticism, but the deeper issue seems to have been this. Why should Moses alone hold such authority? Why should he stand above the others? Why should God speak through him in a way that set him apart? These are not small questions. They go to the very heart of leadership. And they remind us that even in sacred history, human emotions such as jealousy, resentment, ambition, and wounded pride could still emerge. The wilderness was not only a place of travel, it was also a place of testing. The people were being tested. Their leaders were being tested. And within that testing, hidden tensions came to the surface. The book of Numbers then brings the conflict to a dramatic turning point. God calls Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the tent of meeting. This was no ordinary summons. The tent of meeting stood at the center of Israel's spiritual life. It was the place where divine presence and guidance were made known. To be called there in the midst of conflict meant that the matter was now being judged at the highest level. As the three leaders approached the tent, a cloud descended over its entrance. Throughout the wilderness journey, this cloud represented the presence of God among the people. It had guided them, covered them, and signaled when to move and when to stay. Now that same cloud descended in response to a family dispute that had become a challenge to Moses' place in Israel. The image is powerful. A brother, a sister,
a prophet, a high priest, a challenge, a summons. And then, silence beneath the cloud. At that moment, the argument was no longer between siblings. It had become a matter placed directly before God. What followed would make clear that Moses' position had not come from personal ambition, political maneuvering, or family privilege. It had come from divine appointment. And the difference between Moses and every other leader in Israel was about to be declared in unmistakable terms. From within the cloud, a message was given to Miriam and Aaron. The words were direct and unmistakable. "If there is a prophet among you," the Lord declared, "I reveal myself in visions and speak in dreams." But Moses was different. With Moses, the communication was not distant, symbolic, or indirect. According to the biblical text, God spoke with Moses clearly and directly. This declaration set Moses apart from every other prophetic figure in the story. He was described as faithful in all of God's house. That phrase carries enormous weight. It means Moses was being publicly affirmed not only as a leader, but as a uniquely trusted servant within the entire community of Israel. The challenge from Miriam and Aaron had questioned whether Moses truly stood in a category of his own. Now that question had been answered. Yes, others could serve. Yes, others could speak. Yes, others could have roles of spiritual importance. But Moses had been entrusted with something different. His calling was singular. His authority was not self-appointed. It had been given. And the challenge to that authority carried consequences. When the cloud lifted from the tent of meeting, Miriam was suddenly afflicted. The text describes her skin becoming white as snow. The moment is startling and severe. The one who had spoken against Moses now stood under visible judgment. Aaron immediately saw what had happened and understood the seriousness of the moment. He turned to Moses, not in argument, but in desperation. The complaint was over. The challenge had collapsed. Now there was only fear, regret, and the hope that mercy might still be possible. Aaron pleaded with Moses not to let Miriam bear the full weight of what had happened. And here the story takes another important turn. Moses, the one who had been criticized, did not answer with pride. He did not respond with triumph. He did not use the moment to humiliate those who had opposed him. Instead, he prayed. His prayer was short, simple, and deeply human. "Heal her now, O God, I pray." In that brief line, the character of Moses stands out clearly. He had been questioned, but he still interceded. He had been challenged, but he still showed compassion. He had been placed under family pressure, but he still asked for mercy on behalf of the one who had opposed him. That response is one of the reasons this story matters. It is not only a story about authority, it is also a story about humility. Miriam's punishment was not removed immediately, but it was limited. She was sent outside the camp for 7 days and then allowed to return. That period mattered. In the structure of Israel's camp life, to be put outside the camp was to experience separation, waiting, and public consequence. Yet the story also tells us something striking. The entire nation waited for her. Israel did not continue its journey until Miriam was restored. That detail is easy to overlook, but it is powerful. It tells us that even after judgment, Miriam remained an important figure in the life of the community. Her absence was felt. Her restoration mattered. The nation did not simply move on without her. It paused. It waited. Then, only after she returned, the journey continued. The story closes without giving us more information about the Cushite woman herself. She remains one of the most mysterious women in the Bible, unnamed, briefly mentioned, yet central to a moment of enormous significance. Because of that single verse, readers are forced to reckon with a truth that the Bible quietly preserves. Africa was present within the world of Moses, not at the edges, not as an afterthought, but within the very story of Israel's leadership, conflict, and covenant journey through the wilderness.
The reference to Moses' Cushite wife may be brief, but its meaning reaches far beyond a single family dispute. It reminds us that the biblical world was far more connected than many modern readers imagine. Too often, people picture the world of Scripture as isolated, narrow, and culturally uniform. But the ancient world was full of movement. Trade routes crossed deserts and followed rivers. Merchants, soldiers, rulers, and travelers moved between regions. Ideas traveled. Languages traveled. People traveled. The Nile Valley in particular formed a vast corridor linking Egypt with the lands further south, including Cush. This meant that Africa and the Near East were not strangers to one another. They were neighbors in a shared world of exchange, conflict, diplomacy, migration, and memory. That is why the mention of a Cushite woman in the life of Moses should not be treated as a strange intrusion into the story. It is better understood as a glimpse of the broader historical reality in which the Bible unfolds. And it is not the only glimpse. Elsewhere in Scripture, Cush appears again and again. The descendants of Cush are named among the early nations. The prophets speak of Cush. The Psalms speak of Ethiopia stretching out its hands to God. Later, in the New Testament, an Ethiopian official appears on a desert road and becomes one of the most memorable African figures in early Christian scripture. Taken together, these moments form a pattern. Africa is not absent from the Bible. Africa is present from the beginning, sometimes openly, sometimes quietly, sometimes in the background, sometimes at the center of the action. The story of Moses' Cushite wife belongs to that pattern. She appears only briefly, but her presence opens a window. Through that window, we see that the world of the Bible included African lands, African peoples, and African connections woven directly into the narrative. We also see something else. Some of the most important truths in Scripture are hidden in small details. A phrase, a single verse, a passing reference. And yet those details can reshape how we understand the larger story. This is one of the reasons hidden stories matter. They slow us down. They force us to look again. They remind us that the Bible often says more than we notice on a first reading. In the story of Moses' Cushite wife, we find conflict, authority, mercy, and mystery. We find a family divided. We find a leader affirmed. We find judgment followed by intercession. And behind it all, we find a quiet reminder that Africa was already present in the sacred history of Israel. That truth deserves to be remembered, because when we recover these hidden connections, the biblical world becomes larger, richer, and more complete. The story of Moses' Cushite wife may begin with one brief verse in Numbers 12, but it points beyond itself. It points to the wider map of Scripture. It points to the ancient roads between nations. It points to the overlooked presence of Africa in the unfolding drama of the Bible. And it reminds us that some of the most powerful stories are the ones that history nearly taught us to pass by. The ancient scrolls still speak. Join us next time as we uncover another forgotten story from the hidden scrolls of Africa.